This recording is from March 2011. 4:15 or 4:19 rather here on News Radio 1040 WHO. It'd be nice if I could learn to read a clock at some point or another. Nicole, that's your job from this point forward. Read the clock.
I can do that. I'm teaching my stepdaughter at home the exact same lesson right now.
Off of digital clocks or off of the analog clocks?
She's got the digital ones down. Thank you.
See, I'm too dumb to read the digital. It's staring me here in the face, and I said 4:15.
No, we've had a whole debate at home. She doesn't understand why she needs to learn the analog clock.
Because they're a lot cooler.
I guess.
That's just what we'll say. We'll go with that here in a minute or two. This is Nicole and Brian in the afternoon. Nicole Fredericksen, Brian Gongol here, and we're here with you on News Radio 1040 WHO, getting you rolling into all of the traffic and the news and the sports and the weather and all these things that are essential to know.
Now, speaking of sports, we've, of course, been talking about the potential football changes coming this fall. I'm devastated as a football fan. I know you're a bigger baseball fan. You feel like you've been through this before.
Yeah.
Not as big of a deal.
It doesn't matter. We can just keep doing baseball if you want. Baseball in November, fine with me.
Baseball is different. No, football, there's something about it. It marks an entire season for me. The loss of it would really be devastating.
Well, we're trying to avoid that if at all possible. At least that's the negotiation that's going on right now between the NFL, the owners, and the Players Association. And weird things are going on here because it's kind of a monopoly, but it's also a little something else. And so rather than just speculate on it from our angle, we thought we'd bring on an expert on this subject. Dr. David Surdam is a sports economist at the University of Northern Iowa. Go Panthers. Thank you so much for joining us here this afternoon, Dr. Surdam.
You're welcome.
Now, okay, the thing that everybody's familiar with in the world, right, is monopoly. Everybody knows what's going on when there's a monopoly, when there's, just one place where you can go to get things, like, say, professional football tickets. You've got to go to the NFL. But it turns out that this whole negotiation is all messed up right now, and they've just extended their negotiations for another 7 days, right? They're going to try to negotiate for another 7 days longer. But you said when I was talking with you before that there's just a reason this is going to happen over and over and over again in the future, isn't there?
Well, in general, what we have is, as you pointed out, a monopoly in the sense that the owners have a monopoly over ticket prices and territorial protection. On the other hand, the players have a monopoly through their players' union, so they have a monopoly on their labor. But the owners have what economists call a monopsony with regard to bargaining with the players and setting salaries. They got this power by, first of all, the reserve clause, which ties the player to the team, although there's some limited amount of free agency in the NFL. And secondly, through the reverse order draft of amateur, particularly college players.
So when you say, and this is, I see Nicole looking at me funny because I use this word sometimes and everybody gives me funny looks. Monopsony. It's like the inverse of monopoly, isn't it?
Well, monopsony is a situation where you have a single buyer, and typically in American economic history, it was a situation where you had a coal mine that ran the town, and you remember the song 16 tons, and every day, another day older, another day whatever.
Another day deeper in debt, yeah.
Yes.
Right, and oh my, so the company store, so to speak. And it turns out that's somewhat of a misnomer, but we won't go there. But the monopsony power that the NFL owners have, let's say you're a talented college player, and so they have that reverse order draft, and the purpose of that draft, although they claim it's for competitive balance, but the evidence is pretty spotty for that it actually does that. But the stronger argument for the owners, or what the owners like about it, is that the reverse order draft gives them sole bargaining with the players. So if you want to play NFL football next year, you can only bargain with the team that drafted you.
But this hasn't come up. I mean, this has been the way it's been since the union was created. It comes up this year as the owners are asking for that $1 billion more. Why does that make so much more of a difference in this situation?
Well, I'm not sure about this particular case. All I'm saying is that the reverse order draft combined with the reserve clause is what gives the owner this kind of power. Normally, if you were a 22-year-old graduating, say, from UNI in accounting, it would be outrageous if the big four accounting firms had some sort of draft of young CPAs coming out of college, or law firms had a reverse order draft based on their win-loss percentages. And let's say
you lost the largest number of cases. You were the ones who got to hire them first, right?
Right. But see, the fact that you're laughing shows just how absurd it is that we subject these athletes to this kind of a situation.
Right.
It's clearly not fair. And as I said, the idea that it promotes competitive balance is the fig leaf that covers the owner's naked desire to have the sole bargaining with the players.
So you're saying the only way to get around this is really to completely change the entire structure of the NFL and the ownership group?
Well, that would certainly be far more radical than what the players are advocating. And they're not even advocating at this point touching the draft, except I noticed that they are arguing about rookie salaries.
Mm-hmm. Now, the thing is, this isn't, it's not like this just came out of thin air. I mean, there's also the deal with if the NFL wants them to play more games, well, that's the only place, again, if you're a professional football player, that's the place where you have to go, but you have to do what they want you to do. But at the same time, two additional games or whatever in a season, I mean, that's going to beat up people a lot more.
Well, it's not really 2 additional games because they're taking 2 away from the preseason.
Right, hypothetically.
Well, you have different players, though.
Right. So, but as you're doing that, then that changes the dynamic then of who gets beaten up, doesn't it?
Oh, it absolutely does.
And so, okay, if we change all of this around, if there's a rearrangement to the schedule, what do you see this happening as they go through the rest of this negotiation period? Is there any chance, do you think, that they're going to break this deadlock quickly, or do you think it's going to drag on forever?
Given the indeterminacy that you have when you have a monopoly versus a monopsony, as I told you before, that's sort of the ultimate economic fight card.
Right.
Typically, there is no definite outcome, whereas if you just had a monopoly, that's a pretty definite outcome. If you just had a monopoly, that's a pretty definite outcome. In this situation, it's likely to be protracted because it's indeterminate. It depends on whose bargaining power is stronger. So they can go back and forth for a long time. It also may depend upon how much hard feeling there is. I mean, I study the NFL, and I'm working on a book in the 1950s on the NFL, and although the owners often appeared paternalistic, and I think they did care about the players, it was still an exploitive system, and I think the players have a long history of being somewhat distrustful of these owners. And some of the owners, apparently, from some of the quotes I've been seeing, they're chafing under this. They want ever more revenue and profits and stuff. So I suspect it could be protracted, but on the other hand, they say there's $9 billion on the line, so that's a lot of money.
I guess we'll find out. Dr. David Surdam at the University of Northern Iowa, thanks so much for joining us here on WHO.
You're certainly welcome. Thank you, Brian.
You have a good one.
It sounds like it's all coming down to ego, is what I'm hearing there a bit.
It's definitely an element of the whole process.
Well, make sure you guys stay tuned. We have the WHO radio word that wins coming up next, along with a guest in the studio.
You got it. So traffic and weather coming up here on News Radio 1040 WHO.